Hello, and welcome to Understanding Mood Disorders. My name is Rosemary Anderson, LCSWC Clinical Supervisor in the Treatment Foster Care Program at the ARC Baltimore. And today, I hope that the information that you learned today about mood disorders is informative and teaches you what mood disorders are, how past trauma affects mood, the effects of stress on the brain and emotional regulation, how to identify and support individuals we serve, our colleagues, friends, and family who may be experiencing mood changes, and learn how to help others seek additional evaluation and support for mood dysregulation. So let's get started. So we have two parts to this session. Our part one, we're going to define mood changes. We're going to talk about the statistics regarding mood disorders. We're going to learn about how to differentiate between mood and emotions. We're going to discuss the factors that influence mood changes. We will touch upon adverse childhood experiences, ACEs, stress and the brain, types of mood disorders, and how to recognize mood changes. We will follow that up by having a part two where we'll talk about the impact of mood changes in our lives, discuss coping strategies, talk about self-care and wellness. I'll share with you some helpful suggestions to support others, talk a little bit about suicide prevention and the importance of the role that we play in everyday life to support others if we suspect that a loved one is in need of support. And I will share some resources with you. So first, I'd like to take a quick quiz, true or false quiz, on mood disorders. And I'd like you to take an opportunity now to share what you know already coming into the session. There's a 10-question quiz. You can either click on the Google form below, or there is access to a PDF version which you can print out in preparation for the pretest. And at the end, we will discuss the answers to the pretest. So I'm gonna give you about 5 minutes to 10 minutes to do the pretest. And we will connect on the other side. I'd ask that you pause the video at this time, take the pretest, and then join us again. Okay. So what are mood disorders? Mood disorders represent a group of clinical conditions whose common and essential feature is that there is a disruption or what we call a disturbance in mood, but the most important part is that there is a related cognitive, psychomotor, psychophysiological, and interpersonal connection in which the disturbance in mood actually impact those areas of life. In layman's term is when our mood is dysregulated, our thinking, our interaction with our family, our interactions with others in our lives, our physical and physiological reaction is impaired. Who does mood disorders affect? Well, depression and what we call mood disorders are the most common type of mental health disorder. Globally, an estimated 5% of adults suffer from depression, and women are affected by depression at a higher rate than men. Depression can lead to suicide. And as of 2020, suicide is the leading cause of death in the US. Specifically, as we look at children ages 10 to 14, preceded only by unintentional injury, and 21% of US adults experience not only depression, but a mental health condition in general. The impact of depression and anxieties on the global economy can be measured as high as $1 trillion in loss of productivity per year. And young adults ages 18 to 25 in the US have the highest rate of mental health concern at a rate of 30.6%. So as we move on and we talk about mood disorders specifically, I want you to think about these statistics, and I hope it creates a sense of urgency as we look at, the part we play in supporting others that might be affected by mood disorders and depression. Okay, what's the difference between mood and emotions? I thought it was important that we talked about that. Dr. Aikman, who wrote a book entitled The Nature of Emotion, lays out 5 factors of mood versus emotion. I thought it was a great way to kind of lay it out so you understand where your emotions lie, and then what is the difference between that and mood. And the 5 factors that were kind of laid out really focused on the duration, and that is how long your moods last, how long your emotions last. Provocation, which focus on what is the difference in terms of the triggers around what affects your mood and what affects your emotion. Modulation, how you're regulated in that way. Expression, meaning what are the expressions, both the physical expressions that go along with that, both verbal and nonverbal. And then finally, your level of awareness. And so as we look at mood and emotions, mood can last for hours while emotions last anywhere from seconds to minutes at most. This is why it's easier to identify an emotional trigger, but difficult to pinpoint the triggers for our moods. Moods also don't have their own unique facial expressions, whereas universal emotions do. Moods are more generalized. They're not tied to a specific incident, but a collection of inputs. And I like that. That collection of inputs is an important point. Mood is heavily influenced by several factors: environment, weather, lighting, people around us, physiology, what have we been eating, how we've been exercising, how healthy are we, and finally, our mental state, where we're focusing our attention and our current emotions. Moods can last minutes, hours, and probably even days. And moods are less intense than emotions and do not necessarily depend on an event or a trigger. Rather than being how you feel in each moment, your mood is how you feel over time. Moods are influenced by that actual thing, how you feel over time. I guess one of the things that really sums it up is this idea of time and recognizing that emotions come first, then feelings come after the emotion chemicals go to work in your body, then moods develop from a combination of those feelings. Keep that in mind. I guess this is a great barometer even for ourselves to keep in mind how we are dealing with things. Like, is this an emotion or this be considered a mood? Okay, so we talked about this idea of when we talked about emotions and feelings, we talked about chemicals running through our bodies. And so one of the things that I thought was really important is that we talk a little bit about the physiology and the brain and trauma as we look at that as it relates to mood disorders and how our trauma can bring forth, especially our childhood trauma, can bring forth lots of stress and lots of chemical hormones released in the body and the brain that really can affect our overall well-being. So I have a couple of videos I want to share with you, and we will move forward from there. I want to make sure that you have video, so hopefully you can hear this. Okay, so when we talk about this idea of toxic stress in the brain, it's important to know that, and we'll talk through some of the mood disorder symptoms. I thought it was important for us to know and talk a little bit about toxic stress, and that toxic stress can lie in the brain, in the body, as we look at our adverse childhood experiences and our childhood traumas. Okay, so what are ACEs? And ACEs are childhood adverse experiences, and these are 10 to 12, and they're finding more of specific areas in our that occur in our childhood, whether it be a child of divorce, a child who witnessed physical and all types of abuse in the home, a child who may have been exposed to substance use, um, a child who may have been witness to domestic violence. And in your packet, I've given an overview on ACEs as well as the ACE test. But the ACE study came out of the California at Kaiser Permanente, and they did a study to really track adults around exposure to childhood traumas and what was the connection between childhood traumas and physical manifestation potentially of those traumas in adulthood through, higher instances of diabetes, heart disease, and other physical ailments. And so what the study found was that if the more ACEs that you had, the more exposure to trauma, the more likely that in adulthood it would result in physical manifestations of that trauma in terms of illness. And so as you look at this barometer, the higher your number of ACEs, the more at risk you are. And so there's a book that I love called The Body Keeps the Score. And it's an excellent book that talks about how that we can, in a physiological way, hold on to our traumas, and that can result in a lot of health and risk factors in adulthood, including our mental health, manifestation of our mental health disorders, mood disorder, and anxiety as two of the primary disorders we found that are linked to trauma response. So one of the things that I would like for you to do, and maybe you can do it after the presentation, or, is to take the ACE test and, think a little bit about your ACE scores, and remember to tie that back to your physiology, your mind-body connection. Okay, so the other thing I think is important to talk about um, is this idea of fight, flight, or freeze response. Because not only do we recognize that, our traumas have a huge effect on us and affect our moods, but we also find that it increases our anxiety. And so it doesn't matter to me whether we're talking about mood disorder, anxiety disorder. I think it's very important that we expose ourselves to ACEs, adverse childhood experiences, and we understand what's happening in the physical body in terms of the manifestation of illness late onset, when we are dealing and still trying to deal with our past traumas, but also our fight, flight, or freeze response, which potentially could, really paralyze the brain around being able to remain calm. And that's what you want for your amygdala. You want your amygdala to remain calm at all times, because those messages that are being sent to the rest of the body produces that toxic stress that we talked about. So I have another video to share with you. Humans, like most. So I thought that was a really good video to talk about fight, flight, or freeze response and how that understanding that response in the brain and understand what happens, it gives you kind of an overview of how not only the anxiety symptoms show up, but the mood, the depressive symptoms show up. And again, that's all could be tied to trauma response in childhood and your mind body connection and the ability to self-soothe, calm, and use techniques in order to get your mind and your body back into a calm and functional state. So whole workshops can be done on whole workshops can be done on ACEs, trauma, and fight, flight, or freeze, and its effect on the brain. So we're not gonna do much more in that area, but I think is an important point to provide perspective in terms of those that are dealing with mood disorders. So the factors that influence mood changes are some of the things we talked about: biology, our genetics, physiological, in terms of negative parent influence, when we talk about the traumas, personality styles, early separation and loss, socioeconomic factors, poverty, stress, community stress, domestic violence, natural disasters, and some of these are actual ACEs. So that's across cross indicator. So look at your ACEs and see what connects. And then cultural factors, religions, caste systems, belief systems, in which that can influence the onset of depression. Okay, what are the types of mood disorders? So I'm going to run through these, and I tried to be as simplistic as possible. I'm sure that if this was a medical course, it would be far more extensive. Um, but here we go. So here are the type of mood disorders. I'm going to start with major depressive disorder, also known as clinical depression, is when a person experiences persistent sadness, a loss of interest in favorite activities, changes to eating and or sleeping habits, feelings of worthlessness or hopelessness, trouble concentrating, and or related symptoms for at least 2 weeks. Persistent depressive disorder, which is known as dysthymia. And the difference with that is when a person has mild to moderate symptoms of depression on more days than not for 2 years. So I always say dysthymia is kind of like the slow but consistent um, depression that's lasting longer, a longer period of time consistently. Symptoms are not as intense as those associated with major depressive disorder. Seasonal affective disorder is when a person experiences symptoms of major depressive disorder during colder months of the year when the days are shorter and darker. And with seasonal affective disorder, I think that a lot of people use light therapy when the daylight savings time comes. Many people travel at certain times of the year, like in January, February, March, when they know that their seasonal affective disorder is more prevalent. And so being aware of how you feel each month is a great way to gauge your mood and how your mood is being affected from month to month. Disruptive mood dysregulation disorder is when a child or adolescent is more angry and irritable than expected, and this may be based on their circumstances. And in some cases, disruptive mood disorder, it may be seen with when children and adolescents are interacting in their homes with parents, or sometimes we see it in children and adolescents as they may be having difficulties in school. Premenstrual dysphoric disorder is when depressive symptoms arise the week before a woman's menstrual period and fade away with the onset of menstruation. Postpartum depression is when symptoms of depression arise in a new mother during the 4 weeks immediately following childbirth. And just a special note on that, we say when symptoms of depression arise in a new mother during the 4 weeks immediately following childbirth. But it's important to note that postpartum depression can be experienced by fathers. And even though fathers might not be as effective, as affected at a higher rate than mothers, fathers are also affected by postpartum depression. Okay, so our bipolar disorders, 1 and 2, um, are far more complicated in constellation. So I want to keep it as simple as possible for you to understand. So I want to start with understanding what mania and hypomania is. So mania are two other identifying factors under the bipolar disorder marking. And so mania is when a person experiences feelings of elation for at least a week, along with high energy levels. They have little desire for sleep, they're irritable, distractible, and have poor lifestyle choices, including making risky decisions. Hypomania, which is a less intense version of mania, with milder symptoms, may last, at least 4 days versus lasting at least a week. And depending on how manic and hypomanic episodes alternate with depressive episodes, there are several types of bipolar disorder that we're going to describe today. Bipolar 1, which is marked by at least one episode of mania and some symptoms of major depressive disorder. Bipolar 2, which is characterized by episodes of major depressive disorder and at least one episode of hypomania. And cyclothymia, which is similar to bipolar disorder, which include milder symptoms of depressive disorder that last about 2 years. All people experience changes in their mood, including highs and lows. Feeling sad, grief, joy, or elation is not the same as having a mood disorder. However, when a person experiences sadness for at least 2 weeks or longer, along with significant changes in eating, sleeping, and other lifestyle habits that make it difficult to function, or if they feel elated for an extended period, eager to carry out risky, impulsive ideas, and or a combination of the two, this is considered mood disorder. There is a host of symptoms. They're vast and extensive in that, but I just wanted to give you some. This idea of suicidal thoughts, attempts, fatigue, troubles concentrating, the feeling of guilt and worthlessness, overeating, loss of appetite, irritability, insomnia, sleeping too little, loss of interest in things bringing you joy. We see in some cases anger and negativity can be associated with mood disorder. And again, problems thinking, concentrating, recalling, focusing on tasks. Our libido is impacted in many cases by this idea of mood disorder. People with bipolar disorder may also experience a range of emotions depending on whether they're experiencing a depressive or manic episode, and that includes concentration issues, slower speech, um, inability to keep up with responsibilities at home, school, or work, suicidal thoughts and behaviors, and a manic episode. Also, we have to note an increased use of drugs and alcohol. Okay, so throughout, we have two major scenarios, and I want you to get your note page out and take some notes. And at the end, we'll give you a chance to look at your notes and we'll talk about what might be possibly happening with John. So John is a 35-year-old man who has been exhibiting some concerns um, cha- concerning changes in his behavior and mood over the past few months. Um, John's friend and family have noticed that he's become increasingly irritable and moody. He frequently snaps at people over minor issues, which is quite unlike him. He's usually easygoing in nature. John used to be an avid outdoorsman, always planning hiking trips with his friends. Lately, he's been canceling these outings and no longer expresses interest in going outdoors. He's socially withdrawn. He is withdrawn for social activities. John used to be the life of the party, but now he avoids gatherings and prefers to spend time alone. His sleeping patterns, his sister mentioned, have been erratic. He's had trouble sleeping. He stays up late at night and often looks exhausted during the day. John's weight has fluctuated noticeably in the last few months. He's lost a significant amount of weight, and he either has no appetite or overeats all the time. John often complains of feeling tired, having fatigue, lack of energy, even for basic tasks, even getting out of bed and taking a shower. His thinking is impaired. He's been making mistakes at work, struggling to concentrate in meetings, and forgetting important deadlines. He has been complaining of frequent headaches and stomach aches, and his doctor couldn't find any medical causes for these issues. His John recently confided in a close friend that he's been having thoughts of ending his life. His friend is deeply concerned and wants to help him. John's alcohol consumption has increased significantly as his symptoms have started to manifest, and now he drinks heavily most evenings. His family history is positive for depression, which increases John's likelihood of developing a mood disorder. Take a minute and we will process this scenario. Okay, there are several red flags that suggest that John may be experiencing a mood disorder, probably depression. It's important for his friends and family to encourage him to seek professional help from a mental health provider. They should take his mention of suicidal thoughts very seriously and consider contacting a crisis hotline or taking him to an emergency room if they believe he's in imminent danger to himself. Early intervention can be critical in managing mood disorders effectively. Okay, what are the impacts of mood changes? What are the impact of mood changes? Well, we know that your personal well-being is affected, your relationships with your family and friends, possibly your coworkers could be affected, your work and school performance is affected, your physical and emotional health is affected, as we said before. Your brain chemistry could possibly have been altered as a result of that. So people with mood disorders tend to alienate family and friends. They often have trouble in school or at work, have difficulty keeping a job. Those with mania tend to have problems with authority figures. Those with depression have a higher risk of suicide. And when mania comes, the risk of death, injury, and trauma caused by reckless and dangerous behavior is high. Okay, coping strategies. Well, we talked a lot about, what is happening in the body and mind. And now we need to talk about what are the coping strategies as you may know someone that is dealing with mood disorders? Well, there are many. Some is diet, exercise, reviewing your physical health, going back to the doctor, having to do blood work and make sure that there isn't a vitamin deficiency of some kind, being aware of your feelings, creating support group that you can go to, staying connected with the world and not isolating to rooms or houses is important. And finding ways to give back and help others and do enjoyable and pleasurable activities is definitely lots of ways that you can cope. Self-care and wellness. The 5 areas of self-care: physical, get enough sleep, exercise, eat good, fresh, whole foods. Emotions, take the time to pause, take time to reflect, breathe. Many of us have iPhone watches that say breathe or say stand. And in those moments, our ability to use stretch and standing and breathing can help us get out of the emotional headspace. Finding joy in small things like laughing and smiling is also important. Social, text with family and friends. Practice healthy social media habits and develop a strong support group. Okay. Spiritual, spending time in nature, reading, praying, if that's your practice, um, engaging in regular acts of kindness, all those fall into the spiritual realm. And physiology, physiology, psychologically, be creative, continue to learn, continue to grow in your learning. One thing that I've done, which is really great, a lot of people do vision boards. It's an excellent way to creatively set your intention about how you plan to take care of yourself. And what tools do you need on the other side to support someone that might have a mood disorder or may be in a process of getting assessed? Is to practice empathy and active listening. Empathy and active listening are two tools of life. And empathy versus sympathy, I don't sympathize with you or feel sorry for you. With empathy, I join you, I listen to you, I'm connected, I can feel how you are feeling emotionally, and in many respects, I'm not judgmental. So empathy is definitely a tool that can be used to help those that may be going through mood disorder. Active listening. When you're active listening, you're attentive, you summarize, you reflect, you share, you avoid judgment, and when time comes, you ask for clarity. So again, empathy and active listening are two tools for life, but they definitely are important here. Okay. So I'm going to spend a little bit of time on suicide prevention because I think it's an important topic. Suicide is the second leading cause of death in adolescents and young adults. 15 to 24. Could you write down really quickly why you think that? Okay, I'm sure you had lots of ideas, and you can definitely write notes as we go along. But again, suicide is the leading cause of death of adolescents and young adults 15 to 24, accounting for more deaths each year than all natural causes combined. And in the US, an adolescent or young person dies from suicide approximately every hour and a half. And for every death of suicide, there's approximately 15 to 25 times as many suicide attempts. So this is a serious concern in our society. The tragedy is that the loss of life is preventable and suicidal crises usually pass, and the treatment is available that can reduce suicidal thoughts and behaviors. So so really being in a position to understand how we can help others is truly important. So first we need to educate about the warning signs. And as it can be very difficult to figure out a youth or young adult is at risk of suicide. So we gotta educate ourselves about those steps. Talking about or making plans for suicide, listening to the words that people say closely. Everyone would be better off if I were dead. I should just kill myself. These are important warning signs to seek help. Seeking access to ways to kill oneself is important. Do individuals have access to guns or weapons in the home? Um, so it'd be important to understand that. Understanding that when people are at risk of suicide, they might give away their prized possessions at some point. They may be in a space of saying goodbye to family and friends or writing a suicide note. So it's important to see the little signs. Sometimes, and this is where the connection between mood disorders and suicidality goes, is that sometimes if individuals might be experiencing more complex types of depression um, that rise even higher than bipolar, they may be in a situation where they may be in a manic phase. Remember, we define manic. And in that manic phase, they may be talking or saying things that are like confusing to someone, but maybe not so much threatening. But I urge you to listen closely, because that may be a sign that maybe taking a loved one, encouraging them to go to the emergency room or encourage them to go into an outpatient clinic at some point would be helpful to seek help right away. That idea of expressing hopelessness about the future, um, talking about emotional pain and distress constantly, and again, showing these worrisome behaviors that really fall on the line of anger, hostility, aggression, agitation, restlessness, definitely warning signs of suicide. And so, in these 5 action steps for helping someone in emotional pain, first thing is ask, are you thinking about harming yourself or killing yourself? 2, keeping them safe, reducing access to any legal weapons. Do you have any legal weapons at home? Is there anything that I can, um, you know, help you with in terms of reducing that possible risk? Be there, listen carefully, and acknowledge their feelings. 4, help connect them to the suicide prevention line 988. And finally, staying connected, following up, staying in touch after a crisis. Okay, here's our second scenario, which involves Sarah. Have your paper out so you can see your notes. So Sarah is a 20-year-old woman who has been dealing with depression for several months. Sarah often feels an overwhelming sense of sadness that has persisted for an extended period of time. She describes herself as having a heavy feeling in her chest that won't go away, even when she's not sure what's causing it. She used to be passionate about painting and would spend hours at her art studio. However, she's lost all interest in her hobbies and can't find joy in activities she once loved. Sarah started declining invitations from her friends to attend gatherings and parties. She prefers staying home and not isolating herself from others, which is very unlike her because she's really an outgoing person. Her sleep patterns are poor. She either has trouble falling asleep or waking up. Her appetite and her weight has changed. She's lost lots of weight and has unintentionally lost a significant amount of weight over the last 2 months. She rarely feels hungry. She rarely eats. She's constantly feeling exhausted, even after a full night's sleep. Simple tasks are difficult and momentous in effort. Her thinking is definitely impaired. Um, Her concentration is poor. She's making frequent errors at work, and she's worried about losing her job because of her decreased performance. She's been experiencing physical symptoms at work and home, including headaches, muscle aches, without any apparent medical issues. Sarah has confided in her sister that she has been having thoughts of ending life. She feels like a burden to her loved ones and doesn't see a way out of her despair. Sarah's mother had a history of depression, which may have increased her vulnerability to mood disorders. Think about Sarah's case and take a moment around how you would proceed. In this scenario, Sarah is displaying classic signs of depression, which is a common mood disorder among women. It's crucial for her loved ones to encourage her to seek help from a mental health professional. Additionally, if she expressed thoughts of suicide, immediate intervention is necessary, and contacting a crisis helpline or seeking emergency psychiatric care is essential to ensuring her safety and well-being. Depression is treatable, and with the right support and treatment, many individuals can experience significant improvements in their mental health. Okay. So now we want to talk about how to get help. We have learned a lot today about mood disorders. We've learned about toxic stress, ACEs, our brain, what happens when we're stressed, how that can affect both our mood and our anxiety. And now we're going to ask for help. I tried to put some resources in here that you can simply get your hand on. 211maryland.org, psychologytoday.com to find actual treatment providers, including psychiatrists, nurse practitioners, social workers, licensed professional counselors that would be able to work with you. Suicide Prevention Line 988, National Suicide Prevention Line. This is a number you can give to many of your family, even if they're not in the state. The other thing about Psychology Today is Psychology Today, in terms of being able to find a therapist, is nationwide. So I think that's a great resource if you would want to provide this information to someone that would be outside of Maryland. And for Maryland, I put in NAMI, National Alliance on Mental Health website, baltimore.org. At that website, there is a community resource section, and in there, it talks about resources as well as advocacy for those with mental health. Okay, so that's it. We have come to the end of the presentation. And what we're going to do now is we're going to go over the post test. So if you get out your paper or hit your Google link, like your Google form, and you look again to see how you did the first time, I'm going to go through the post test. I'm going to actually go through the question and answer the question and provide an explanation. Okay. So number one was mood disorders are always characterized by extreme happiness or mania. Is that true or false? The answer is false. Mood disorders can involve extreme sadness, depression, or extreme happiness, mania, but not always both. Number two, true or false? Bipolar disorder is an example of a mood disorder characterized by alternating episodes of depression and mania. The answer is true. Bipolar disorder is indeed characterized by recurring episodes of depression and mania. Number three, true or false? Seasonal affective disorder is a mood disorder related to changes in weather and daylight. The answer is true. SAD is a mood disorder that typically occurs at specific times of year, often related to changes in seasons and daylight. Number four, true or false? Major depressive disorder, MDD, is diagnosed if someone experiences a single episode of severe depression in their life. Okay, that was a good one. The answer is false. MDD can be diagnosed if someone experiences multiple episodes of severe depression during their lifetime. True or false? Number five, substance abuse cannot contribute to the development of mood disorders. False. There is something known as substance-induced depression and substance abuse, particularly the misuse of alcohol and drugs, can contribute or exacerbate mood disorders. I will say that, and this is something extra as before we go to our next post test, is that we did not talk about any type of mood disorders that could include a disruption in your thinking, which would be hallucinations, delusions, and what we call psychosis. And so while that is definitely on the top tier spectrum, it is true that in many cases, that's an important nuance to think about. Number six, true or false? Postpartum depression occurs only in mothers and not in fathers. False. We talked about that. While it's important for mothers, in mothers, postpartum depression can affect fathers as well. True, false. Children and adolescents cannot express mood disorders. They only affect adults. That's false. Mood disorders can affect individuals of all ages, including children and adolescents. Number nine, true or false? Medication is the only effective treatment for mood disorders and therapy is not helpful. That's, let me read that one more time. True or false? Medication is the only effective treatment for mood disorders and therapy is not helpful. I kind of got a sense that you might have had a hard time with that. That answer is false. Both medication and therapy, such as cognitive behavioral therapy, are effective treatment for mood disorders, and the choice of treatment often depends on the individual and the specific disorder. And number 10, true or false? Suicide risk is higher in individuals with mood disorder and it is essential to assess and address this risk during treatment. That answer is true. Individuals with mood disorders, particularly depression, have a higher risk of suicide, and assessing and addressing this risk is a critical part of treatment. Okay. I hope you got a 100% in your post-test. And I want to say thank you for coming and participating in this presentation, Understanding Mood Disorders. My call to action today would be for all of us to take into consideration some key points. Our ability to understand the difference between our emotions and our mood, our ability to understand generally the type of mood disorders, and to understand ACEs, adverse childhood experiences, be aware of how our childhood traumas affect our mind-body connection, including being mindful of, toxic stress and the effects of toxic stress on brain functioning. And that would be our emotional regulation centers, which would be the place where our mood is controlled. And with that in mind, our ability to understand that will actually help us to develop appropriate coping strategies and to make sure that we're calming down and we're using techniques including mindfulness, cognitive behavioral therapy, deep breathing, yoga, physical um, physical activities, like our exercise, eating healthy, as well as attending and speaking regularly to a mental health professional. And you may need to get support from a nurse practitioner or a psychiatrist in order to help come up with a treatment plan that will help support you living a productive life. And remember that a mood disorder or an emotional response to life stressors can be very different. And when we think again of defining mood disorders, we are saying that our general life, things that we do in our general life, how we interconnect with people, how we go to work, how we go to school, is being severely impacted or even moderately impacted by our persistent mood changes. And so with that, thank you very much. And again, my name is Rosemary Anderson, LCSWC, Foster Care Clinical Supervisor at the ARC Baltimore. I've left references as well for your review, and thank you.